Imagine a Boeing 787 Dreamliner slicing through the night sky at 35,000 feet, carrying 250 passengers over the vast Arabian Sea. The cabin is hushed, the stars are bright, and the engines hum a steady rhythm. But in the cockpit, a single warning light sparks a chain of events that could bring it all crashing down. What happens when the fuel powering a jet is poisoned by contamination? This is the heart-stopping story of Air India Flight AI315, a tale of grit, quick thinking, and a fight for survival against the odds. Welcome to Silent Stories, your channel for untold tales that grip your soul. Subscribe, hit the bell, and buckle up for a 20-minute journey into a crisis that tested the limits of human courage. Captain Arjun Mehra, 47, adjusted his headset in the cockpit of Air India Flight AI315, a Delhi to London red-eye. With 20,000 flight hours under his belt, he was a seasoned pilot, his calm demeanor a product of years navigating everything from monsoons to mechanical gremlins. Beside him sat First Officer Sarah Khan, 32, whose sharp instincts and dry humor made her a perfect co-pilot. It was July 1, 2025, and the Boeing 787 Dreamliner was cruising smoothly at 35,000 feet, its twin engines purring over the Arabian Sea. The cabin was a bubble of tranquility. Business travelers typed away on laptops, families dozed under blankets, and a few tourists sipped wine, gazing at the in-flight entertainment. The flight attendants, led by senior crew member Priya Sharma, moved with practiced grace, offering pillows and water. In the cockpit, Arjun sipped his black coffee, the bitter taste grounding him. "Smooth night," he said, his voice low, almost lost in the hum of the aircraft. "Too smooth," Sarah replied, her eyes flicking to the fuel gauges with a playful smirk. "You know what they say about quiet flights." Arjun chuckled, shaking his head. "Don't tempt fate, Sarah." But fate, it seemed, was already listening. 02:17 a.m. a soft chime broke the cockpit's rhythm. An amber light blinked on the engine control panel, fuel filter bypass warning, engine 1. Arjun's pulse quickened, but his hands stayed steady. He tapped the touchscreen to confirm the alert. The fuel filter on the left engine was clogging, forcing the system to bypass it to maintain fuel flow. "Filter issue," he said, his tone measured but alert. Sarah leaned forward, her eyes narrowing as she scanned the display. "Contaminated fuel?" she asked, her voice sharp with focus. "Maybe," Arjun replied. "Could just be a bad filter. Let's not jump to conclusions." Fuel contamination was a pilot's nightmare. Dirt, water, or microbial growth could clog filters, choking the engine's fuel supply. The 787's systems were robust, designed to handle minor clogs, but a bypass warning was a red flag. Arjun radioed Delhi ground operations requesting the maintenance logs for the aircraft's last fueling. The response was quick. The fuel batch had passed all standard checks. No issues reported. Sarah ran diagnostics, her fingers dancing across the controls. Engine 1 parameters are holding steady. Fuel flows normal, but the bypass is active. "Keep monitoring," Arjun said, his jaw tightening. "If engine 2 goes, we're in trouble." At 2:55 a.m., the cockpit erupted. A second chime, louder and more insistent, cut through the air. "Fuel filter bypass warning, engine 2. Both engines were now bypassing their filters. Sarah's face paled, her eyes locked on the gauges. "Arjun, fuel pressure's dropping." "Both engines." Arjun's mind raced. Dual filter failures weren't a coincidence, this was systemic. Contaminated fuel was the likely culprit, gumming up the filters and starving the engines. The 787 could limp on one engine in a pinch, but if both failed, they'd be gliding a 200-ton jet over the ocean with no runway in sight. "Declare an emergency," Arjun said, his voice like iron. Sarah keyed the radio, her words clipped and precise. "Mayday, mayday, mayday. Air India 315, dual fuel filter bypass, suspected fuel contamination. Requesting vectors to the nearest airport." Mumbai ATC responded, their voice taut. "Air India 315, Mumbai is 300 nautical miles east. Nearest alternate is Muscat, Oman, 250 miles west. Can you maintain altitude?" Arjun glanced at the fuel flow readings, which were dipping slowly but steadily. "We'll try for Muscat," he said, his brain crunching numbers, distance, fuel burn, glide range. "We need to descend now to save fuel." Sarah programmed the flight management system, plotting a course to Muscat's Seeb International Airport. Arjun disengaged the autopilot, taking manual control and easing the nose down to 25,000 feet. The lower altitude would reduce fuel consumption, but it came with trade-offs. Thicker air meant more drag, and they were burning through their reserves faster than he'd like. The descent woke the cabin. The seatbelt sign pinged and a low murmur spread among the passengers. Priya, the lead flight attendant, appeared in the cockpit doorway, her face tight with concern. "Captain, people are asking questions." "What do I tell them?" "Fuel issue," Arjun said, his eyes fixed on the instruments. "We're diverting to Muscat for a precautionary landing." "Keep them calm, Priya." Priya nodded, her training kicking in. She returned to the cabin, her voice smooth over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're making a brief detour to Muscat due to a minor technical issue. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. We'll be on the ground shortly." But the passengers weren't buying the calm tone. In first class, a British businessman, James Harrison, 52, gripped his armrest, his face flushed. "Technical issue? That's code for engine trouble," he muttered to his seatmate, a quiet Indian software engineer. In economy, Anjali Rao, 29, a single mother, clutched her 6-year-old son, Rohan, whispering reassurances as his wide eyes darted to the window. The cabin buzzed with nervous energy, and Priya's team fanned out, offering water and words of comfort, their smiles strained. A teenage girl, Maya, 17, in row 23, was live tweeting the ordeal on X, her fingers trembling. "Something's wrong on AI315. Planes descending. Crews acting weird. Hashtag Air India, hashtag flight emergency." Her post went viral, racking up thousands of retweets as the world began to watch. At 20,000 feet, the situation worsened. The engines sputtered, their thrust fluctuating. The fuel pressure gauges danced erratically, and Engine 1's output dropped by 15%. Arjun's heart pounded, but his hands stayed rocksteady. "We're losing power," he said, his voice low but urgent. Sarah's fingers flew across the controls, rerouting fuel through auxiliary lines. "I'm bypassing the secondary filters," she said. "It's a gamble, but it might keep us going." Bypassing both primary and secondary filters was a last-ditch move. It meant unfiltered fuel, potentially laced with debris, water, or microbial sludge, would flow straight to the engines. A single particle could seize a turbine, turning their jet into a glider. Arjun weighed the risks, his mind a blur of training and instinct. "Do it," he said. Sarah executed the command, and the fuel flow stabilized for now. "Muscat approach, Air India 315, she radioed. "We're at 18,000 feet, 150 miles out, losing thrust. Requesting priority landing and emergency services." "Air India 315, cleared for runway 26L, the controller replied, his voice steady but urgent. "Emergency crews are on standby. Winds are calm. You're cleared to descend to 10,000 feet. Arjun pushed the yoke forward, dropping the plane lower. The lower altitude would give them a better shot at gliding to Muscat if the engines failed completely. He ran the numbers. From 10,000 feet, the 787 could glide about 20 miles. Muscat was 120 miles away. They needed the engines to hold. The cabin was a pressure cooker of emotions. James Harrison, the businessman, was mentally drafting a will, his thoughts racing to his wife and 2 daughters in London. He'd been on a deal-closing trip in Delhi, a merger that would secure his company's future. Now, all he could think about was never seeing his family again. He pulled out his phone, typing a shaky message. "I love you all. I'm trying to get home." He hesitated, then hit send, his throat tight. Anjali Rao held Rohan close, singing a lullaby her mother used to sing to her. The boy's small hands clutched her kurta, his voice trembling. "Mummy, is the plane going to crash?" Anjali forced a smile, brushing his hair back. "No, beta. The pilots are very smart. They're taking us to a safe place." Her heart ached with the lie, but she kept singing, her voice a fragile shield against the fear. Maya's tweets were now a lifeline to the outside world. "Engines are sputtering. We're dropping fast. I'm scared. Hashtag AI315. Her followers, now in the tens of thousands, flooded her with messages of hope. A retired engineer, Mr. Patel, 68, seated beside her, noticed her distress. "These planes are tougher than they look," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "The pilots are trained for this. Trust them." Maya nodded, her eyes wet, but kept tweeting, her phone a tether to reality. Priya and her team worked tirelessly. Vikram, a 24-year-old flight attendant on his first international flight, knelt beside an elderly British woman, Mrs. Evelyn Carter, 76, who was clutching a rosary. "My husband flew Spitfires in the war," she said softly. "He always said pilots are a different breed." Vikram smiled, squeezing her hand. "Our pilots are the best, ma'am. We'll be fine." His words were brave, but his stomach churned. At 10,000 feet, 80 miles from Muscat, engine 1 surged, then coughed, its thrust dropping to 40%. The cockpit shook, a low rumble vibrating through the airframe. Arjun's stomach lurched. Engine 1's failing, he said, his voice tight. Sarah checked the readings, her face grim. Fuel's too dirty. It's clogging the injectors. Switch to the reserve tank, Arjun ordered. The 787 carried a small reserve of clean fuel for emergencies, enough for about 20 minutes of flight. Sarah flipped the switch and engine 1 clawed back to 60% thrust, but engine 2 was now faltering, its output at 70%. Muscat approach, Air India 315, Sarah radioed. We're at 8,000 feet, 60 miles out. Engine 1 at 60%, engine 2 at 70%. On reserve fuel. ETA, 12 minutes. Copy, Air India 315, the controller replied. Runway 26L is clear. Fire trucks and ambulances are in position. You're doing great. Arjun's mind was a storm of calculations. The reserve tank would get them close, but if both engines failed, they'd glide the final stretch. The 787's glide ratio was 10 to 1, 10 miles for every 1,000 feet of altitude. From 8,000 feet, they could glide 80 miles. Muscat was 60 miles away. It was possible, but barely. At 5,000 feet, 20 miles from Muscat, engine 1 died. The cockpit screamed with alarms, engine failure, engine failure. The plane you'd left, the dead engine dragging like an anchor. Arjun countered with rudder, his hands a blur. Engine 1's gone, he said. We're on engine 2 and reserve fuel. Sarah silenced the alarms, her face set. Engine 2's at 65%. Reserve tanks at 30%. She glanced at Arjun, her eyes saying what her voice didn't. They were running out of time. The cabin was chaos. Passengers screamed as the plane lurched. Priya's voice came over the intercom, strained but steady. Please brace for landing. Follow the crew's instructions. Her team demonstrated the brace position, their faces masks of professionalism hiding their fear. James Harrison stared out the window, the dark sea below a void of terror. He thought of his daughter's faces, their laughter at his terrible dad jokes. Anjali held Rohan's face against her chest, shielding him from the sight of flight attendants strapping into jump seats. Maya tweeted, "One engine's dead. We're so low. Pray for us. Hashtag AI315. Mr. Patel patted her shoulder, his own hands trembling. Mrs. Carter's rosary beads clicked faster, her lips moving in fervent prayer. At 2,000 feet, 10 miles out, engine 2 began to falter, its thrust dropping to 50%. The cockpit shook and Arjun's heart sank. We're losing engine 2, he said, his voice a low growl. He pushed the throttle forward, coaxing every ounce of power from the dying engine. The runway lights of Muscat glimmered in the distance, a beacon of hope. Flaps 20, Arjun called. Sarah adjusted the flaps, increasing lift but also drag. The plane shuddered, its airspeed dropping dangerously. Gear down, Arjun said. Sarah lowered the landing gear, the clunk echoing through the airframe. Muscat Tower, Air India 315, 5 miles out, single engine, critical fuel, Sarah radioed. Requesting straight-in approach. Cleared to land, Air India 315, the tower replied. Winds 5 knots, runway clear. At 1,000 feet, engine 2 surged, then sputtered to 30%. The plane dropped, the altimeter spinning. Arjun pulled back on the yoke, fighting to keep the nose up. Come on, he muttered, willing the plane to hold. The runway was close, its lights a lifeline in the darkness. At 500 feet, 2 miles out, engine 2 gave out. The cockpit fell silent, the alarms replaced by an eerie stillness. The 787 was now a glider, its massive wings carrying it forward on momentum alone. Arjun's training kicked in: glide path, airspeed, angle of descent. He kept the nose steady, aiming for the runway threshold. Sarah called out altitudes: 400 feet. 300. 200, the runway grew larger, its white lines stark against the black tarmac. The cabin was a cacophony of gasps and prayers. Priya gripped her jump seat, her eyes locked on the cockpit door, trusting Arjun and Sarah. At 100 feet, the plane sank fast. Arjun flared the nose, squeezing every bit of lift from the wings. The ground rushed up, the runway lights blinding. Brace! Sarah shouted into the intercom. The 787 hit the runway hard, the tires screeching. Arjun slammed on the brakes, the reverse thrusters useless without engine power. The plane skidded, veering slightly left before straightening. It slowed, then stopped, 200 meters from the runway's end. Silence. Then cheers erupted in the cabin. Passengers hugged, cried, and clapped. Priya unbuckled, tears streaming down her face as she checked on passengers. James Harrison exhaled, his phone buzzing with his wife's reply, "You're coming home." Anjali kissed Rohan's forehead, sobbing with relief. Maya tweeted, "We landed. We're alive. Hashtag AI315. Mr. Patel smiled at her, his eyes misty. Mrs. Carter clutched her rosary, whispering, "Thank you." Emergency crews swarmed the plane, guiding passengers to buses. Arjun and Sarah stepped out of the cockpit, exhausted but composed. Priya hugged them both, her voice breaking. "You did it." Investigators later confirmed the fuel was contaminated with microbial growth from a Delhi storage tank missed by routine checks. Air India grounded its 787 fleet and new fuel protocols were enforced. Arjun and Sarah were hailed as heroes, their actions saving 250 lives. That night, in a Muscat hotel, Arjun stared at the ceiling, replaying every moment. Sarah knocked, holding 2 teas. "You saved us," she said. "We saved us," Arjun corrected, clinking cups. The weight of survival settled between them, a bond forged in crisis. The story of AI315 spread globally, trending on X and dominating news. James returned to London, hugging his daughters tighter than ever. Anjali and Rohan started a new life in the UK, her courage inspiring others. Maya's tweets became a book deal, her story a beacon of resilience. Mr. Patel visited his grandchildren, telling the tale with pride. Mrs. Carter sent Arjun a letter thanking him for her life. Silent Stories thanks you for joining this tale of survival. Subscribe, share, and stay tuned for more stories that capture the heart of humanity's fight against the odds.